Katsuki took a shallow inhale of breath, his bare feet padding against the cool floor of the Heights Alliance dorm building. Only midnight, and it's still been a long, sleepless night. He'd lay in bed exhausted, but unable to drift off for what must have been hours before he decided to break the rules and seek out his partner's bedroom. Bakugou wasn't usually one for disobeying UA rules, but needs must when nothing was getting him to fall asleep. So, he tiredly sauntered down to the second floor in hopes of finding a cuddle and a decent night's rest. You knew that he'd probably come down here tonight, so you hadn't bothered locking your door in case Katsuki came to visit in the night's darker hours. Katsuki's exhausted body was heavy with sleep as he plopped himself down beside you in your warm, comfortable bed, gently pulling some of the blanket over himself. His soft hair tickled against the back of your neck as the delicate smell of your recently washed hair filled his nostrils, a wave of calmness washing over him. Huh? Bakugou grumbled when he noticed the little white earbuds resting in your ears, the wire leading under your chin to your phone somewhere on the nightstand. He tutted smallly, carefully removing one of the buds and listening to the gentle music coming out of the speaker. You stirred, an annoyance resonating in your faint mumbling sounds when the blonde boy behind you chucked your earbuds away from the bed.
Dumbass, it's not safe to sleep with these in,
he complained as you turned to snuggle into his chest. Luckily, Katsuki hadn't woken you up, but he did feel a touch guilty for disturbing your deep slumber. He sighed deeply, one of his pale hands finding itself in your soft hair and allowing his fingers to run through your silky locks. His other arm was busy pulling you closer into his embrace, assuring you that you were kept warm against his chest. A small part of Katsuki wished that you were awake to see him caring for you, but he knew that if you were, he'd end up stumbling over his words and getting embarrassed and lose the sincerity of the gesture.
Where the north wind meets the sea, there's a river full of memories. Sleep, my darling, safe and sound, for in this river all is found.
Bakugou's voice, while slightly shaky, was smooth and calming. It was vastly different to his harsh speaking voice. The beautiful, rich quality of his deep bass-tone voice filled you with a warm feeling of complete safety, his song chasing all of the darker dreams from your mind for the night.
In her waters, deep and true, lie the answers and a path for you. Dive down deep into her sound, but not too far or you'll be drowned.
He yawned softly, stroking your hair and closing his eyes before he lay a gentle kiss to your forehead. This was pure heaven. Safe to say, that was the best night's sleep either of you had ever gotten. Tokoyami didn't mind living next to a cemetery. His was the only house on the block, which also suited him just fine. It was a nice house, suited for a hero such as himself, and the relative isolation means Dark Shadow could stretch as much as he liked. They had practically given this house away when he bought it. It was the only reason a broke university student like himself could afford such a place. The old owners were nice people, if not eager. He was sure something must be wrong with the house. There was no other reason for it, and he soon got his answer. The wife pulled him aside one day, her eyes wide, frightened. "I have to tell you before you decided to buy this place. It would be wrong if I didn't," she muttered. "The cemetery. It's haunted. You can hear the ghost in the night." Tokoyami was sure that the cemetery was haunted. Most were, but normally the spirits that lingered weren't strong enough to affect this world. This was intriguing. "Not every night, but most nights there you can hear singing. It's maddening," she warned, but it only solidified his interest in the house. A spirit, and one strong enough to sing. He would have to see it for himself. He had, of course, neither heard nor seen anything paranormal in his months living in the house or wandering through the supposedly haunted cemetery. Still, he believed what the woman had said to him. Besides, he mostly worked in the night shifts and was only home during the day, and she had said the singing was only at nights. But tonight was different. Tonight he was home instead of fighting villains. He supposed he could sleep like the rest of the world, but his nocturnal lifestyle was one that was hard to break. He watched the sun set over the shaggy trees and headstones that made up his backyard.
Revelry in the dark,
he muttered to himself before sighing and moving from the window. He had laundry to do. There was silence in the night, the sound of his washing machine as it pounded away, and not much else. He tried to focus on what other noises he could hear, the rustle of leaves as the wind blew, creaks of floorboards as the house settled, and the call of a bird or some other animal. A sharp, clear voice cut through the tranquility. Tokoyami jolted. When he thought of singing that wouldn't let you sleep, he had imagined banshee wailings. Not this. This was beautiful, melodic, a siren's song, the kind of music that was too breathtaking to be slept through. He went to the window and threw it open, straining to hear the song as it drifted further away from him, deeper into the cemetery. A siren's song, he thought again before putting on his shoes and venturing into the night. He had to see where it was coming from. He had to know. He scanned for a source of the singing, while trying his best not to trip over any of the headstones or uneven pavement. He was close enough to make out the lyrics that accompanied the melody he had heard, and he recognized it. You're not a voice, you're just a ringing in my ear, and if I heard you, which I don't, I'm spoken for, I fear. Everyone I've ever loved is here within these walls. Was that Frozen? While he was wondering if ghosts could wander far enough to go to movie theaters, he almost fell on top of you. You screamed, which made him scream, which made you jump back. One thing was obvious. You were not a ghost. You were alive and human, which was a little disappointing. What the fuck are you doing here? You demanded, still clearly more scared than angry. What are you doing here? Who sings in the middle of the night in a cemetery? He shouted. You got to your feet and glared. You jabbed your finger at two of the graves. Because they like it, you dick! You shouted. He looked at the graves. Mr. and Mrs. Yamaguchi. His heart sank. Were they your parents? Suddenly, he felt horrible. Who was he to police how people mourned? I'm sorry for your loss, he muttered. Then you laughed. Oh, they aren't my parents if that's what you're thinking. But no one visits them, and they like it when I sing. You explained, sitting back down in the grass. What are you doing here anyway? You asked, the defensiveness gone from your voice. I live in the house on the hill. I heard you singing, he said, sitting down cautiously next to you. You went pink. Then I should be the one apologizing. I didn't think anyone lived there, you muttered sheepishly. It's fine. I don't sleep much at night, he admitted. Your gaze was far off. He didn't want to leave, even though he had gotten his answer. Can you see them? You whispered, nodding to the spot above the headstones. No, he said. Do you want to? Yes. You took his hand and laced your fingers through his, and suddenly, he could see what you were talking about. Two wispy smoke-like figures hovered above the graves. They looked like puffs of breath on a cold day, but instinctually, he could tell they were the spirits you were singing to. You started singing again. The wisps seemed to glow brighter, like they really were happy. That's where Tokoyami found himself, sitting in a graveyard, holding hands with a siren.